The Rubik's Cube average world record is probably the most meaningful record in all of speedcubing, and you might know that during the 2010s, Feliks Zemdegs held this record 14 different times, and is still by far considered the most dominant cuber of all time. But one of these times in particular where he broke this record was like nothing anyone had ever seen before, and maybe even the greatest 5-solve performance ever that no one today even knows about at all. Because when I personally found out about this, I was absolutely shocked, and I really just didn't know that this happened. So in January of 2010, Feliks broke this record for his first time, getting the first ever sub 10 average officially, which was a 9.21 average of 5. And then over the coming years, he continued to improve upon that until we get to the record that I want to talk about today. You see, in September of 2013, Feliks broke his own record twice in the same week. First bringing it down to 7:53 and then 7:49 on September 7th of 2013. And that's the thing, he would only ever break his own record by at most around 0.2 seconds, and usually just around a tenth of a second, until on November 16th, 2013, when he broke his record again. But this time it was just different, so remember the previous world record is the 7.49 he set 2 months prior to this. 6.91, and this was just the first solve of the average, and you can see that everybody's already clapping, right? They're already very, very impressed by this solve, because sub 7 at this point was pretty much unheard of. Like, nobody besides Feliks and Mitchell Lane was getting a sub 7 in 2013, right? 6.41, 6.25, 7.30, and finally, the 6.31, which secured him this absolutely unheard of average. And what was by far the world record average of the time? Feliks ended with a 6.54 average of 5, beating the previous record by nearly a full second. But what's even crazier is that he didn't break this record himself for another 3 years until 2016 when he beat it by 9/100ths of a second. And no one else beat his record until 2017 when Max Park got his first ever world record average of 6.39. And what's so crazy to me about this is that the average world record is nothing like the single, right? Like the single usually, you can see that last for a very, very long time. Whereas the average is constantly broken like every 6 months to a year at most. So for him to hold it for 4 years straight is just absolutely insane. So I'm going to break down the second solve of his average, which was a 641, just to show you how incredibly ahead of his time he was, and why no one else really stood a chance at all. Alright, so Feliks does a solve on yellow cross, which means we can scramble with yellow top and green front, just so this solve will show up on white cross. Alright, so we can see that our cross pieces are here, 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 and here, and we also have this line right here, and we're going to use this edge, this corner, and also this corner to make a double X cross here. So what he does is he holds his cross color on front, and he's going to start out with a wide R prime move to actually just put these two cross edges in adjacent to this one, and then you're going to kind of start to see how he forms this X cross right here with the U move, and then he's going to rotate, and now you can just see that all he needs to do is put in this cross edge and also this corner to finish off the double X cross. So what he does to put in this cross edge without really affecting these two pieces down here is he just does another wide R move, and then he does a U2, and then he can just put it in. So then he just finally needs to put in this one, and all he has to do for that is just a U prime, and then insert it regularly like it's a regular F12 piece, and you just put it in. So you can put the corner in like that. And now an interesting thing that he decides to do is, instead of just doing a D prime here, he actually instead chooses to do a wide D prime. And that puts it at the back and just makes everything at the front a lot easier to really just see in general. And then he can do a D prime and a U prime at the same time. And the reason he does that is probably because he sees this pair as his third pair. And yeah, so he's just going to finish off the X cross like this, and then he does a U prime, and now we just have these two. And it's really easy for look ahead because this pair is already just in the wrong slot. So he actually just pairs it up normally, inserts. And then this is a really interesting thing that he does. All the way back in 2013, Feliks, of course, he was already just using VLS because he's Feliks Zemdegs and he has to do something crazy on every solve. Instead of just inserting it regularly and getting this OLL case because, you know, that's for slow people, what he does is he goes like this. And that actually just gives him an OLL skip. Very crazy stuff. You rarely ever see that type of stuff used today, just because people can turn a lot faster, and the hardware is so much better. But yeah, just peak efficiency right there. And then something really crazy that he does is, so basically, he rotates, and then he does a U prime, and then he starts off this alg like this, and the way that this G perm actually goes is you rotate, and then you do some wide moves right here, and that just finishes it off without an AUF. I think that he maybe rotated to avoid the AUF, but also that G perm just had a mandatory rotation in it, because that was the main alg that people used to use back in 2013. Because, you know, back then the hardware just wasn't good enough to really use this alg right. A couple of the D moves just weren't really very viable in speed solves. So instead, he opted to use the wide move alg, which is very understandable. And this solve was only 39 moves, which really just shows that you needed efficiency above all else to get sub 7s back in 2013. You needed really, really efficient solutions. And that's why Feliks took advantage of things like VLS, and also just being very efficient on the X-Cross. So yeah, just a very, very impressive solve. So the craziest fact to me about all of this is that in 2020, this 654 average from 2013 would have still kept him top 20 in the world. I mean, every single solve from this average was better than the previous record, and 4 out of the 5 of his solves were sub 7. I mean, that's a level that even some of the fastest cubers in the world still struggle to get to today. And that's not to mention that he was also using the Weilong. Now, I don't mean the Weilong V35X Premium Pro, like whatever it's called, that we all have today. I mean, literally, the original Weilong, like the Weilong V1. So that's why he used funky algorithms and did like 2 rotations during last layer. I'd say that 2012 to 2015 Feliks was by far the most dominant cuber that we've ever seen. I mean, if you think that Yihang Wang's gap between him and second place today is crazy, imagine him getting a 3x3 world record average that was 0.95 seconds faster than his one right now. So a 343 average, and then 4 out of the 5 of his solves are basically just sub 4s. And his counting times would be something like 3.5, 3.7, and 3.9. So yeah, that's basically the equivalent of what Feliks did back in 2013. I mean, obviously it would have been a little bit different, but it still shows how crazy this was to even happen. I mean, he had 3 solves in this average alone that came within a second of the world record single at the time. And in 2013, he was doing these crazy things like EO to ZB, VLS, like these crazy double X crosses that basically no one was doing back then. It's pretty crazy that no one even really uses VLS anymore, just because it's so much faster to just insert the pair and then do the OLL, because hardware is so much better and solving styles have just changed to the point where you'd rather just turn faster and have really good look ahead than be that efficient. Unless you're Timon and you can just do pseudo quadruple X crosses into, you know, ZBLS and then ZBLO, or a 6-year-old girl, or this 4-year-old who's probably going to be doing that in like a couple months. But back then, Feliks basically had the perfect solving style and skill set for the hardware that he was given, and getting sub 7s on the Weilong V1 in 2013 is pretty crazy. So yeah, early to mid 2010s Feliks was just so much faster than everybody else, and I don't really think that we'll ever see that kind of domination on 3x3 or really any event for that matter ever again. Unless the kindergartners rise up and take all of the world records, which they definitely will, so here's the daily reminder that that is going to happen, and you're also still just slower than them in general, so even if they don't, you still have something to be ashamed of. So yeah, if you enjoyed taking a look at that with me, that was pretty interesting, I must say. I had never really heard of that record before. You know, I'd always heard that, like, you know, Feliks kept breaking the records. I wasn't cubing back in 2013, but I just know that Feliks was really dominant during that time, and he just kept breaking his own record over and over again. But I didn't know that this kind of a jump was even something that happened. Like the 749 to 654 was just crazy. And yeah, if you enjoyed that at all, you can go ahead and subscribe if you want to up here, and you can watch this video right here. And we keep getting closer and closer to 5K, so thank you guys so much for your support, and yeah, that's about it. See ya.